Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Common Threads podcast. I'm your host, Kate Hall. Today, we have a very special guest, my good friend, Malia Villarreal Staheli. Malia is 28 years old and is from a town called Othello, which is an extremely small farming community in Eastern Washington. She is a beautiful mix of a bunch of different cultures and identities and identifies as Latina-Polynesian. Malia loves fashion, thrifting, food, traveling, listening to ABBA, and anything to do with the beach. And she currently works as a marriage and family therapist. So, thank you so much, Malia, for being here. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So I kind of just gave a brief intro to you. Obviously, there's so much more that makes you you, but do you want to introduce yourself and tell everyone a little bit about you?
Yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the big stuff, but yeah, like I am from Eastern Washington. There's definitely more cows and than people where I grew up, which is kind of weird being in Utah where I mean in Provo, Utah, it's a little bit different. Um, I am a marriage and family therapist. I just graduated from my master's program from BYU and currently working full time and loving not being a student anymore. I know Kate very well. Kate is actually one of the first friends that I met, well, friends of my husband that I met at the beginning of our like relationship, and so I really just adore her, and I adore you, Kate. Well, I'm excited to be here. So I don't know. You kind of hit all the big stuff. I'm excited just to keep on yapping and
Yeah,
let
we
you
can
know
get
it.
into
Yeah.
it. Totally. So let's start with some early childhood experiences. What was it like growing up in a super small town in Eastern Washington?
It's kind of like a fever dream, to be honest. Like I go home. My family actually moved away from this town when I was on my LDS church mission. And so when I go back to Othello, Washington, it feels kind of different. It's still very small. But to me as a kid, like that was my whole world. And my whole world was like my graduating class was like 100 people, 200 people, I think, less
Mm.
than 300. Like I knew everyone. People's lives were very slow, and it was all based on like farm work and agricultural community out there. So I enjoyed it. It was definitely unique in the way that majority of my town, it was either you worked in the fields or you were the farmers, or you were either descendants of one of these two groups. So my family were like migrant farm workers, and so that was kind of our way of being part of Othello, Washington, and kind of where we started at, and then later progressed into different capacities and careers. So with that being said, like there's a lot of migrant workers that come from like Mexico majority. And so my upbringing was very different in the way, like very different from Utah, from where I'm at, that 90% of the people there were Mexican and spoke Spanish. So very similar to me. Um, and so I felt very comfortable in Othello. So that's just like a little bit. Do you have any like follow-up questions on that?
Yeah, for sure. So my first follow-up question is, do you remember, and maybe you were super little, but do you remember like any of the political dynamics going on
Yeah,
early in your childhood?
for sure. I was thinking about this this night. Like I was like, okay, Kate's gonna ask me all these questions. But I do remember the first Obama election, like so
Okay.
vividly. It was pretty crazy time. And I remember my family, like my parents were really, really excited to have like a president that could empathize with the minority experience. And that was huge for us. I remember like I had a freaking Malia Obama bobblehead. Like we were just like all for this. And that wasn't like the main reason, but that was just like really it just amazing for us and all the minority individuals in the United States to be like, wow, like this can happen. So I
Mhm.
remember going to school one day and sharing with my friends. I'm like, I can't vote, but my family's gonna vote for like Barack and Michelle, and we're so excited. And there's all these things. And I remember it was met with like it was the white students and actually like kind of white religious members were like, well, no, it should be. I think it was John McCain, right? That was during that time.
Yeah. Yes.
No, my family's voting for McCain. He's better and he does all this. And so that was like the first time in my life that I kind of experienced like this political riff. But I was
Mm.
just like, no, forget you. We're freaking voting for Barack Obama. But it was just like that, yeah, that first interaction of okay, there's some differences in political beliefs. And it wasn't hostile. It was just like, oh, we just do this.
Mhm.
When Obama did win, it became a lot more real for my family. I think like my grandparents cried, my parents cried. Um, and we watched his like inaugurational speech. Like it was really big, like on live TV. And I was like, okay, this means something bigger than than me just talking crap to a kid on the playground. Like I think I was in like fourth or fifth grade. And so that was like the first experience me acknowledging some political influence in my life.
Mhm. Were your parents super political? You mentioned that they voted for Obama, but were they very politically active other than voting? Did you guys talk about politics a lot
Yeah, so
growing
we
up?
we didn't specifically talk about like Democrats, Republicans, but like issues were always talked about in my family. It's like political issues, but it was never like who you're voting for. They were actually pretty quiet about who they voted for a very long time until like Obama and also until like 2020. Issues were always talked about in our family. Like my parents were very vocal about immigration. Um, we've always been very aware of like our migrant status of like my grandparents and my great grandparents, and very aware of like our immigrant brothers and sisters. So to the point where that my extended family, like I have uncles who are immigration lawyers and specifically work with like the migrant community in Eastern Washington. Um, and so specific issues were very important. So like race, immigration, were honestly and like racial justice and injustice was huge, and like anything having to do with like undocumented members of societies like DACA, dreamers. Knew all those words before I was 12.
Mm. So you touched on a little bit the importance of representation and like specifically feeling that with the Obama administration, but I'm curious, did you also see representation in politics in like local or state government, or was that kind of a completely different experience?
Yeah, it was yes and no. Like definitely having a town that's 90% Latino. Like I found representation in a lot of like the like local leaders, like the mayor and the commissioners. Like there was definitely like a Latino influence. But when it came to like policies, like this area of Washington is very conservative in
Mm,
general. And I think the majority of the conservative voices, like, were happen to be white members of that community. And so, and white and religious. Actually, Othello, everyone goes to church on Sunday,
mm.
which is just kind of unique. And so that was like the dominating voices of the thing. There's still small groups of less conservative, more far like left leaning, but the biggest voice was conservative.
Gotcha. Was that like kind of confusing to like have obviously more liberal views like being taught at home and then having some of these like more conservative views in the community? Was that kind of a confusing thing growing up? Do you remember at
Uh,
all?
it definitely was a little bit, especially when I had like friendships that said one thing. And then I would come home and I'd be like, Mom, like they said this about race or said this about that. But one thing my parents did very well, like I called them like they're mixed kids raising mixed kids. So
Mm,
both my parents had like in their childhood way years before in the 80s and 90s had to figure out their own racial identity and what that meant for them, especially being in predominantly white communities. And so it was really like it was hard to be out in the world and experience that. Like I've had people like question my race in like these settings, question my ability, question like my academics. And so I would go home to my parents and they were extremely validating and be like, no, that's not right. Go tell them XYZ and like remember like this is your superpower. Like they would always tell me that like this, like you being able to do this and to have these backgrounds and to have these experiences and this perspective is going to be your superpower throughout your entire life. And so it affected me, but also like I had a really great support system to feel empowered and not completely drained by the experiences. Does that make sense?
yeah, yeah, definitely. That's such a cool environment to grow up in, to have that support system within your
Yeah.
house and like having your parents kind of go through similar things
Yeah.
that you were going through.
Shout
It's
out to
really
Mike and
cool.
Nani. Oh, like for real. They they it always annoyed me how much they said that. I was like, it's so cool that you're like X ethnicity, so you have X percent. I'm like, yeah, mom, I know. But now as an adult, I'm like, holy crap, like that meant everything to me. And now
Mhm.
as an adult, like, yeah, I still navigate through my own personal challenges, but like that was a core belief that they created for me.
That's really cool. So, touching on this a little bit more, you talked about having all of these different cultures kind of ingrained in your life growing up. Were you able to experience each culture kind of equally, or were there some that were more prevalent in your household than others?
Mhm. Great question. So when it came to my Latina culture, I felt like I had more experiences and more exposure to that than to my Polynesian culture. So in Eastern Washington, I was like, my family were the only Polynesians in this one town. Like there really wasn't anyone like us that, I mean, everyone saw Lilo and Stitch and that's what they assumed Polynesians were, which is not like the best representation, but it was some
Mhm.
then. The only time that I got exposure to my like, Tongan side is when I visited family here in Utah, which is a pretty huge Polynesian community, specifically Tongan. Um, so when it came to like navigating that, I feel both, but when it comes to maybe confidence, navigating those like different cultures and exposure, I feel very confident. I'd like navigating through like my Latina side because I had like all these models of like Latina women. I went to a Spanish congregation for my church. Um, Everyone in my school was like either full or half Latino. Like it was just, I know this culture and I know how to like dip my toes in it and navigate it. And I think it wasn't until me coming out to Utah as a college student that I finally had more time put aside to look at my Polynesian side. And that's the part of me that I'm still like developing. So my mom is Polynesian, um, but she like spoke Spanish. She embraced a lot of my dad's culture. She did teach us about hers, like tried showing us how to dance, and we were all terrible about it. Uh, but it wasn't the same immersive experience as if like I had lived in that community.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. Was your community in Eastern Washington, you mentioned they're mostly Latina, but also had some white kids at school.
Mhm.
Do you feel like they were accepting of other races and ethnicities, or was it kind of you're either Latina or white, or kind of don't fit into this bubble? I don't know if that makes sense,
Yeah.
but
So they were the minority, definitely. Like white,
okay.
like that was just wild. Like, yeah, at the time they were the minority group. And so a lot of them were very accepting.
Mm,
Um, like all the like school teachers and my friends, like one of my best friends, like our favorite thing growing up to do, like we spoke Spanglish. Like she is not any hint Latina at all. But like she knows all these Spanish words and we ate like the same Spanish candies or all the music. And so like the joke is like in Othello, you have to speak Spanish to survive or have some sort of connection to it. But it doesn't like mean that there wasn't any pushback. Like there was um, always like microaggressions. There was always jokes about Latinos, and specifically amongst the like Latinos itself, there was always like another layer of like microaggressions and racism, specifically for like Latinos who are more like fair and Latinos who
mm.
identify more indigenous or and so that was like another like subcategory of that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense. That's really helpful background information. So I wanted to shift into like your middle school and high school years.
Mhm.
And this might be a very like broad question. I'm
Yeah.
sure there's a lot of experiences, but I was going to ask, were there any experiences that stood out to you that kind of shifted how you saw the world at that time?
Yeah. And a lot of like so the first one I was 15. So Living Legends is like a BYU like dancing group and they represent
Hmm.
like Native American, Polynesian, and Latino countries. Like they dance the folk dances from those countries, and they travel all over the world. And my mom actually danced for them when she was in college.
Oh,
So
cool.
they came to our town and they danced for us. And that was like one of the first times in my life that I could witness like Polynesian dancing and Latino dancing at the same time. And it was like I bawled. Like I was 15. I'm like, why am I crying? But I was like, okay. Now as an adult, I realized I'm like, that was such a validating experience and a beautiful representation of like the mixing of cultures that I always had to be and always was. So that confirmed to me like this is like a really beautiful part of me and I want to maintain it. Like I want to keep this alive forever.
That's so
So that's
cool.
like a beautiful side of it. I also had a lot of like negative, like high school sucks, but a lot of negative experiences too that like pushed me away from that. Like, no, you
Mm,
should be ashamed of this, or you should pie this away, or you shouldn't be, like you should follow the flow of everyone else. Um, I had experiences where like I remember applying to like BYU and people told me I would just get in based on my race or like how many scholarships I would get.
mm,
I actually was the only person out of all the LDS kids or like Latter-day Saint kids that got into BYU. So a lot of them all applied, like, and I was the only one. And so like, oh, it's because Malia's brown. Like
mm.
that was the best excuse that they can give. Like, no, because I actually did way better than you and all these things. But
Yeah.
that was like the way that they tried to understand of like, oh, why didn't I get in and Malia did? Um, there was a couple friends that would call me like burrito. And at the time, like it was uncomfortable. Like obviously, like I don't want to be called a burrito. That's
Yeah.
minimizing in so many different ways. But I was so scared of not being accepted, especially since the majority of members, like members of the Church of Jesus Christ Latter-day Saints in this town were white. And so if I say something that they don't like, I could get kicked out of like one group that I really want to identify with, but I also am the only brown girl here.
Mm,
Um, so it was like a mix of like growth of I'm so proud of this on one hand, and at the same time, I really want to be accepted, but being accepted also means that I'm hurt. So as like a little teenager, I didn't know like what the actual hell I was doing, trying to figure out all those feelings and all those experiences.
yeah. Yeah, I can imagine that being a really confusing time. I remember just reading through your survey, you mentioned that you had to like, kind of learn to stand up for yourself. Do you
Mhm.
remember, like, was there a time where you felt a shift in that and you said, okay, I gotta start, being proud of my heritage, being proud of my culture, and start standing up for myself as a person? I don't know. Was there like a specific switch that happened?
Yeah. I gotta like definitely thank my mom. Like my mom is a very like usually kind of quiet person. She ever listens to this. Yeah. She's usually like pretty quiet, but when injustice ever happens, she's the loudest woman in that room. And that's something I just adore about her. But I remember one time it was at like a big mutual activity of all combined wards or all combined congregations. And a leader had said something pretty racist about some of the girls in my congregation. Like pretty terrible things and assumptions. And my mom like clapped back. She was the young
Mm,
women's leader and she basically just said it how it is, like what you're saying is wrong, what you're saying isn't true, and what you're saying is hurtful. And I remember that was like the first time I was like, "Oh gosh, like that's like I need to do this a little bit more." And so after that, that's when I started finding my voice of like, okay, I can say this is wrong, I can say this isn't true, and I can say this is hurtful too. And I remember one kid told me like a Mexican joke because I guess those were popular in high school. It's terrible. But I remember telling him to like, I'm like, that's wrong. You're dumb and find a better joke. And it was kind of a big shift because everyone around me was like, oh my gosh, Malia's so mad. Like she's being so crazy. I'm like, no, guys, like I'm like the one Mexican here. Like you can't be
hmm
like saying crap like that. I'm not gonna agree with you. And that wasn't until like I was honestly towards the end of my senior year. So there was a long time where I had let that slide because of fear and honestly like my own challenges of speaking up. But it wasn't until I was like towards the end that I was able to kind of actually voice what I was thinking.
Gotcha. Do you feel like because a lot of people like once they get into high school, they start they're introduced to a lot of different political beliefs, and it sounds like you were kind of like introduced at a very young age. But
Hmm.
just curious if like this was a time when you started to think about more politics and I don't know. I'm trying to think of like how to ask this question.
Like when I was like more political, like that.
I don't know, like yeah, like it started to like think critically about other like I don't know, obviously like race and culture and everything was
Yeah,
like super important throughout your life, but other like political ideas and
for sure.
I don't know. Yeah.
It was definitely during this time. Like I had a friend that came out and they were the first person that I knew being a part of the LGBTQ plus community. Like my only exposure to that is what other people had told me and what like the media portrayed, which can be very hurtful either way.
Hmm.
And so I remember like there was adults saying like, "Oh, don't hang out with them. Don't like be a part of their life or they're doing this wrong." And I remember feeling so conflicted and being like, I know them personally. I love having them as a friend. They're the nicest person ever. They're going to come over to my house all the time because that's what they did before. Like nothing
Hmm.
changed for me. And so that was like the first time that I was like, not the one of the first times, one of the many times I was like, I don't like, I wanted to go against what was like the dominant discourse of this area, like the dominant story of, oh, if they're gay, avoid them. And I was like, no, like
Gotcha.
that's so weird. And I was actually kind of seen as like this outspoken person for doing that, or like,
Mm.
which was I thought was weird. And what my parents thought were like, my parents were like, no, that's weird that people think that. Because I had like they had exposure as well to like people of the community, and they were very comfortable with that as well. And so it was just like
Mm.
interesting.
Yeah.
I also, correct me if I'm wrong, because my memory fates me. It was 20, it was the 2016 election, it wasn't 2015. So the 2015 to 2016 election is when things started like with Trump like kind of heating up that way. And I think that's where I finally became a little bit more like specifically political,
Gotcha.
um, specifically with things about Mexico building a wall.
Hmm.
And so it like happened a little bit before, but when it became like actual like voting and like being more involved in the policies, that's when it all started.
Gotcha. No, that makes sense. So you graduated high school and then you went to live in Argentina for a
Mhm.
while to serve an LDS mission.
Yeah.
So did you go to college first or did you jump right into serving a mission?
No, girl, I went to college. I had to kind of figure out how to cook food on myself before they sent me all the way to South America. Yes, I went to a year of college at Brigham Young University in Provo, Utah, which is like predominantly, well, it is not predominantly, it is like a college um that was made and funded by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So a lot of like the culture in the college is LDS. Majority of the students happen to be white. Doctrine and principles are taught, and so it can be definitely like a really cool experience being there. Especially since I was like didn't grow up in Utah or didn't grow up in like that sort of environment. But it also came with a lot of its challenges. One being that I went from like being the majority to like the minority in a day.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, like everyone's saying my name wrong. Like that was really big. Like everyone was saying my last name wrong. I'm like, no, it's Villarreal, not Villarreal. Like say it right. Or my name's Malia,
Hmm.
not Malaya. Um, because my entire life people didn't question that. And when I got to like freaking roll calls and like syllabus days, my professors would always just like, oh, I don't even know how to say this, so can I just call you something else? And I'm like, no, just say my name.
Yeah.
So that was a big jump for me. And especially there was a time during that election. So things on campus were heating up. Um, that's when I think a lot of political like clubs started heating up as well. And there was this big, all the news articles were talking about how we're gonna have Mexico build the wall. And so as like being a being a Latina and having part being like having Mexican ethnicity, that was terrifying. Um, because that meant like people would look at me, that people would assume this about me. It felt like I was being singled out. And I recognize I do have a lot of privilege. I am mixed. I am like more fair or like kind of light presenting Latina. So there was times I could definitely just go with the flow or like try to like avoid it. But there was a
Yeah.
lot of my friends and families that could not. And so I identify with them, I identify with their community. And so it just felt like a whole magnifying glass was on us of what we were going to do. And everyone was mad at us and telling us to build a wall. It got to the point I actually
Mm.
wrote a lot of my essays my freshman year about that rhetoric.
Well,
So
yeah. Do you feel like there were like any pockets that you were able to find like culture and community in and people that were accepting of your different culture, or do you feel like it was mostly people just trying to make you fit into their mold and fit into their lifestyle?
I think during that time, I kind of reverted back to me being really scared, and trying to fit to BYU instead of having BYU fit to me.
Mm.
Um, because again, I was back at square one. I'm like, I'm the only brown girl in this ward, for this congregation. Like, no one like has these experiences. I don't even know where to go to. My sister's in her own like ward. And so I reverted back to I shelled up a lot. The only thing that provided some sort of lifeline for me was that I had worked with a multicultural student service counselor. So BYU has a really great office. It's called MSS, Multicultural Student Services Office, and a lot of their counselors are BIPOC, and all of them are there to support BIPOC students with anything. Like it doesn't have to be academics. And so I like lived in that office of like, hey, I'm just gonna go talk to my counselor today. No biggie. And so those are really validating experiences. So that was a lifeline there. I also was around my Polynesian family, which provided some sense of home and community. Because I'm not like my roommates were very kind. There was nothing wrong with them. Still like friends with a lot of them. My ward was fine. It was just this big gap in experiences and expectations and like pain. Like while they had a different set of pain, my pain was, oh my gosh, I have a target on my back, and Donald Trump is going to make us to build a wall, or he's trying to divide me from that.
Mhm.
And I was like, okay, they wouldn't get it because it's not on their radar.
Yeah.
So it was just a weird, like honestly, freshman year was weird.
Yeah, yeah. Um, so one more question and then we can bounce back to I did want to ask a couple questions about your mission. But so around this time there was also a lot going on like with BYU specifically.
Mhm,
There were a lot of like pushes for social change on campus and like a lot
mhm.
of LGBTQ protests. There were a lot of like sexual assault allegations and treatment of women like cases and um so I'm just curious, like, what was it like being on campus at that time, specifically as a woman and as a person of color? And you kind of touched on this, feeling like there was a target on your back, but like specifically on the BYU side, there's obviously stuff going on the federal level with the Trump administration,
Yeah.
but then also being like, I don't know, kind of separated.
It was pretty eye-opening of like who's your people and who's your not, like who do you not want to be your people at that time. Um because like there is like an added layer of church culture, and like this is like a patriarchal church. That's just inherently what it is. Um, but it was really nice to find people that could follow my same belief system, but also provide empathy and space and understanding and promote change in that belief system. Does that make sense? So
Yeah.
like there was definitely like a clash. Like there was always protests going on. Like this was back in like 2016. Yeah, there was always protests. There was always flyers. All the Instagram pages were blowing up, and it felt like a kind of bit of like a war on campus. And a lot of my sanctuaries were with, like, professors and family and friends, like, people that or, like, specific friends that people I knew that could get my story and provide space for that.
Mhm.
So, I hope that answers your question. I don't know if it did.
Yeah. No, it definitely did. Did you ever consider, like, moving universities or moving, like, even states? Because Utah in general is not very diverse, not super accepting of other cultures. I mean, there are definitely pockets, but
Yeah.
just curious if that was a thought process or if you were.
No, that never came up, um, because I honestly did think about if I am not here, if I'm, like, that's just a loss. We need diverse culture, like, diverse voices. We need BIPOC professors and students and graduate students. And so, honestly, it was hard and there was lack of resources during my time. There's way more now in, like, 2025. But it all kinda went back to, like, what I'm doing is so important, and, like, this could be important for the students that are coming behind me. Um, so just, like, a side note, like, a lot of my family, like, my BIPOC grandparents were all, like, transitional characters. So, like, a transitional character is someone that changes the course of a family's journey forever. And so, like, my grandfather, he was a migrant farm worker, like, worked in the fields as a kid, endured so many forms of racism and microaggressions, ended up going to Harvard Business School. Like a predominantly white university, like very white university.
Yeah.
It was hard for him in so many ways. But again, he thought, I have my family to show that I can do this, and all Latino men and women that I can do this. Same thing with my other side. Like, my grandfather came from Tonga, had to learn English, became a UVU professor. Like, and so, like, spaces of education, it's like this is really hard and we are in, like, really big white spaces, but there's always, like, you endure it because you're trying to build like more space for people like us here. Does that make sense?
Mhm. Yeah, definitely, yeah. I've talked with some friends, obviously, I went to BYU as well, and, um, the formation of, like, the Black Menaces specifically happened while I was on campus, and I have a lot of friends in that community, and just talking to them, like, same sentiments is just, like, we need to be here, we need to show that there's a presence and that, like, more BIPOC people need to be at this university, and so, yeah, I love that. So shifting back to a year at BYU and then you moved to Argentina, what was it
Mhm.
like moving from, I mean, first a small town in Washington and then not a super small town in Utah, but still not very big.
Not
What
very
was it like?
big.
Yeah, what was it like moving from like that to a completely
It was
different country? Yeah.
I honestly think back and I'm like, "That was freaking insane." I enjoyed my mission, I loved what I did, and I loved, like, being a part of that, but, like, the shifts of, like, more cows than people to, "Oh my gosh, we have, like, a Chick-fil-A. I never experienced that in my life in Provo." And now I'm in a freaking different country sharing the gospel of Jesus Christ with people I never met in a language that I kinda know, but I don't. So definitely a lot of big changes. I was just, like, giving myself a little big change at a time until I went to
Mhm.
Argentina. Um, Overall, like, I enjoyed my mission. I am really grateful for, like, a lot of experiences of growth that I had out there. Um, it definitely, like, wasn't easy. Like, missions are inherently very hard, emotionally and spiritually and physically. As, like, for political, like, challenges or issues at times, so I actually missed I was here for 2016 till June 2016, then I was gone, so I actually missed the entire, like, not the entire election, but, like, the grand, like, the him actually, like, people actually becoming president.
Mm.
So there was, like, a space in time where it wasn't extremely on my radar, but was, like, a lot of people out there asked me what I thought about the political environment here. When I said I was from Washington State, they thought they meant the White House, and I said, "No."
Mm.
It's actually a complete opposite side of the country. Um, but more about, like, issues, like, during my mission is when I finally was able to, like, learn Spanish completely. which honestly helped me feel a little bit more confident in my identity and for me to navigate that. I think it also provided me more confidence to say what I mean. I mean, I had to live with a companion. So, like, as missionaries, you're with a companion like 24/7, people you don't usually know, and you have to work together. So, maybe working with people that you didn't initially get along with isn't easy, but it provided me a lot of opportunities for like really hard conversations. Because I think before
Good.
it was easy for me to shut down or get really angry, which, yeah, emotions are going to happen. But this one helped me kind of fuel them into a better, productive conversation. So, overall, good. Definitely hard. If you had to, like, do you have any specific questions on that one? Because that's kind of a big one.
Yeah, yeah. So, and I know when you're on that a mission, like your focus isn't necessarily politics, but I'm just curious, like, were you seeing anything like in Argentina specifically with the government there? Anything that was different or maybe similar to what was going on in the US?
Yes and no. I served in really, really small towns, and so we were far away from like the capital, which is Buenos Aires. Um, there was a lot of like complaining about their current president and like the value of like a peso, but I wasn't that much involved with like Argentine politics. Like I knew who Evita was, like everyone knows who like Evita Peron is and her the musical and things like that, but it wasn't I didn't spend a lot of time diving into it. As for like American politics, like I remember going outside to start my day with my companion and looking in the newsstand and seeing that he had like Donald Trump had won. And my companion who wasn't from the United States, she's like, "What does that mean for you?" And I'm like, "I have no idea." And just getting emails from home of like, "This is what's happening. These are some changes. Just be aware." My sister like emailed me. She's like, "You She's like, "You should have kissed the ground, but you should have kissed American soil before you left Argentina, because now when you come back, it's all different." Like, things like that. Um, so I had some influence there. I was like, "Okay, there's this is weird. Like, this whole entire thing is weird." But it wasn't I was able to, like, kinda put it aside for a second and just kind of focus on my mission for a lot of the time, but it was always there.
Yeah. Was it weird going back and like definitely a very different culture politically in the States from when you left when you came back and obviously you said you were kind of still keeping up a little bit with what was happening in the States, but was it weird to like have been gone for like the first part of Trump's administration and then to come back and you're
Yeah.
like dropped kind of right in the middle of everything?
It was really weird. I remember I was like, I don't know how this happened." But, like, my parents kinda gave me a rundown of things, and just, like, the political atmosphere at the time. So it definitely, like, it was interesting and weird, and there was still pretty negative political rhetoric all going like, that was just the beginning of everything, really, but, yeah, I knew it felt off. It felt weird to me.
Shifting just a little bit, so come home, you're going back to BYU to go to
Mhm.
school, and you decide to become a marriage and family therapist. Was this always the plan for your career, or did it kind of evolve, like, while you were in your undergraduate program?
Yeah, no, it wasn't always a part of it. I'm definitely in a yapper, so for those of you listening, and this is, like, maybe an hour and a half interview, I'm so sorry. I've always loved people. I've always loved people's stories. Um, I mean, in the cultures I grew up in, stories are kind of like the backbone to everything that we do. Like, here's a story about this cultural event and this one. So I've always been curious about how people see themselves in the world. So I thought I was actually going to go be a history teacher because I loved that so much. And I had a really great history teacher in high school. And then I realized, oh, I hate writing. And I hate the history classes that I was taking. And I ended up switching my major to family life because I thought, what the hey, these classes look pretty entertaining, and I ended up falling in love with it, specifically on, like, the idea of people we are all part of systems. There's this idea called systems theory that we are not just individual, but we are part of, like, an interconnectedness of systems that have created us. So like I'm not just individual, but I have like my family system and my cultural and my language and like we are just an accumulation of all those things.
Mhm.
And so that really called my attention to look at myself that way and look at people. Because if you just take me at face value and just sometimes take my opinions at face value, like where did that come from? But this was a way to back up and be like, that makes sense that you said that, or that makes sense why you're that way. And so I ended up applying to marriage family therapy programs here and was accepted to BYU's, which I was really excited and extremely terrified because it's not an easy program, but it's one
Mhm.
that I'm honestly extremely grateful that I did. Um, and a lot of my training, because I do speak Spanish, like was like providing therapy for like Latino families and also like BIPOC individuals and families, which was honestly really cool to do.
Yeah, that's really cool. Specifically, so diving into this a little bit more, specifically with the Trump administration coming back into power this year, and you're kind of starting your therapy program and getting clients and everything, do you feel like you're seeing like any trends? Do you feel like these communities are suffering more than beforehand? And
Oh yeah.
yeah,
Oh yeah, there's no question.
yeah.
There's so much fear. Um, like working with couples and families of like coming into therapy and saying like this is like our lifeline like right now. Like we have no idea what's happening. Um, I don't know what this means for my family. I don't know what this means for the future of like just what this means. I don't know what this means with the church. Like it's just it has induced so much fear and confusion and insecurity in so many of like BIPOC individuals in this area. And it's so hard because I myself feel that. So I'm like, we are just sitting together in this because that's
Mhm.
because there's so much that is in our control to change it, and there's so much that there isn't. And what isn't in our control is something that's so infuriating. So let's just kind of be together and witness this. But that was like the biggest thing because and along with that, a lot of the people in my program, like we had a very unique cohort or like group of individuals who were training at the same time as me, that majority of us were BIPOC women, which was honestly a blessing because we were able to be amongst each other and try to understand each other's and we're all different experiences, different cultures and regions and languages of BIPOC. And so a lot of, yeah, it's definitely affected all parts of therapy.
Yeah. How do you balance, I mean, obviously having your own fears and your own like issues going on with the current administration, like how do you balance it? I mean, this is like the weight of their world being put on your shoulders, but also having your own anxieties and frustrations and fears. Like how do you balance that? Like I feel like it would just be so heavy all of the time.
Yeah, that's a hard one, eh? Because I love having a back and forth conversation, but as a therapist, um, it's honestly constantly reminding myself that my story is my story. It can definitely have similar elements to my clients, and it has, but respecting their story enough to not take parts of mine and intrude on theirs. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Does it mean I can't validate or just say like I totally get that and I'm with you? If I just never want to cross the line if someone's sharing something so hard, like what's been happening with the election and their experience, I'm not gonna say, well, I blah 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 blah, because it's not my time. I definitely have my own spaces for that, but I want to make sure that they're feeling heard because we're definitely living in a society where these voices are being squashed and there's no space for them or they're considered like too loud or too this. And so my job is like, no, you can be as loud and as angry or as scared as you want in here. And I'm going to hold this with you. I definitely have my moments. I'm like that. But like right now, this is all about you. This is not about me.
Being a person of color, being a woman in this, political environment, what like for other people who might be going through something similar, and I don't know if advice is the right word, but like any
Yeah.
like statements of encouragement or like anything that like gets you through the day that you can maybe share with anyone like listening who might also be facing similar things.
Yeah. It's pretty cheesy, but it's not untrue, but, like, when you're in the sort of space, when you're in, like, a minority when you are a minority in a majority space, there is always this inherent sense of loneliness, right? That no one can get this experience because they haven't lived it. And so, like, you're not alone. Like, that's, like, the first one, like, you are like, there's so many maybe voices that are quieter, voices are still learning to claim their voice versus who are I don't know, there's just so many levels of people in their journey with this, but, like, the first one, like, you are truly not alone in this. And that, like, everything that's happening that you're feeling and your anger and frustration, like, that is extremely valid. It's when we're told things are invalid is when we get really angry and hurt. And so, like, that's the first thing. Your loneliness is valid, your anger is valid, your sadness is valid, your experience is extremely valid. And it's okay to be angry about it because that means you're hurt and injustice is happening. It's when people try to, like, put a Band-Aid on it that I get pretty pissed. I'm They're like, "Well, at least it's not, like, 50 years ago." I'm like, "It's still bad."
Yeah.
Um, so I would want them to know that, and also if I had to quote, like, my parents, this, like this is one of the most beautiful ways, like, you and your ethnic background and you and your experiences is one of the most beautiful ways that one of the beautiful things about you. And maybe, yeah, sometimes it's really hard to embrace it and to sit with it because it can carry a lot of pain and experience. And also it can carry a lot of, like, joy and confidence. And so I don't know, I'd pull a Nani, who's my mom, be like, "This is, like, your superpower."
No, I think that's perfect. I think that's such a beautiful sentiment. And yeah, I just appreciate you being like willing to share and
Mhm.
being vulnerable because I know this is like a really hard time for a lot of people, as I'm sure it is for you. And I just appreciate you like being
Of
a support
course.
and reminding people they're not alone. I think that is like the number one thing when anyone's going through anything, like you are not alone. There are so many people going through the same thing. Um, so one final topic I wanted to touch on before we move on to some specific political beliefs. But you married a lovely white conservative man from Southern Utah. I love
Yeah.
him so much. And I'm going to interview him after Malia's episode. So for anyone listening to Malia's episode, his will be on for next week. So make
2
sure
for
you
1.
2 for 1 special. We love that. Um, but he has like a very different background
Mhm.
to your background.
Oh, yeah.
Um, and I wanted to just ask, like, was it difficult for you guys because you have such different ideas on how the world works and different political identifications? Like, was that hard for you guys to kind of navigate at first when you were like dating and getting engaged and everything?
Yeah, great question, and I actually love this question because me and Colton talk about it all the time. So yes and no. Yes, in the way that it was hard. It's never comfortable to acknowledge that there's differences, right? It's like, oh, if there's differences, we automatically think it's bad, right? And so that was like the
Hmm.
first, like, that was really hard to be like, okay, my husband who has this background has never had XYZ experiences that I've had. And me with my background, I've never had XY experiences that he has had. Something that is really unique about our marriage is that we have very similar core beliefs about the world, about God, about people. And so, yes, like he's more conservative leaning and I'm more liberal leaning. The core beliefs that we have are like not changing. And we also like something I really appreciate about Colton is he's never trying to invalidate or convince me that I'm wrong or that I'm, like, dumb for feeling one way, and it goes the same way. because we have a motto in our marriage. Maybe he brings it up. If he does, it'd be really cute. Um, our motto is that in this marriage, we're allowed to grow. And so with that, that's like me growing to understand like why would you like how is this important to you in this way? And for him to understand why is this important for you in this way. It doesn't mean that we don't acknowledge like there are privilege differences for sure. And like sex differences for sure. And just like where we were raised and the experience we were exposed to, like those are things that we acknowledge all the time. But it's also holding those and holding that we can be individual, but still be together.
I
It's
love
actually
that.
it's actually called a it's so here's like a plug-in for therapy, it's called differentiation. So it's this idea that can we differentiate ourselves from the emotions and experiences of our partner, right? So, like, when it comes to, like, me navigating my own racial and ethnic challenges or my own, like, my own journey with that, it's like, "Okay, that's I'm going to navigate that." Colton, like, he can help influence that for good or for worse, but he's definitely not in charge of fixing that for me. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so what we do is like, okay, that he's going to witness my experiences. He's going to sit with that and acknowledge what that means and open up conversations, and the same for me to him. So like honestly, I remember we were talking, like I was taking a class at BYU and privilege came up, and I was explaining to him what privilege meant, and he was like, "I don't even know what that means." And I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "This was, like, language I got, like, when I was 10 years old. Like, this I
Yeah.
knew about this forever." And I started like, "Why don't you know this?" And I noticed, like, me saying, like, "Why don't you know this? Why don't you get this?" It was pretty shameful of him, and he was like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." Like, I'm like, "Wait, wait, wait, this is not how the conversation I want to go." I'm like, "Would you, like" he's like, "Can you actually teach me a little bit more what that means? Because I mean, I think it means this way." I'm like, "This is what it means in this context. This is what it means for me, and this is what could it mean for our relationship." And so we had a conversation, and then it was, like, a week later, he texts me, he's like, "I actually watched, like, 5 different movies on, like, the civil rights movement. Can I talk to you
Mm.
about them?" And I was like, "Okay. Yes, we can." Um, and so that showed me, like, yeah, he's leaning one way, and I'm leaning the other, but it doesn't mean, like, there's no conversations or there's no growth happening in either way. Because when
Yeah.
this pointed on, he was like, "I understand what this means for us." And I'm like, "Oh, great." I'm feeling seen, he's feeling more he's not feeling like I'm shaming him for not knowing, but, like, we're on, like, this level playing ground of we can grow together. Growing is painful in a lot of ways, it's going to be, and we give space for each other to, like, make mistakes in this process. So this doesn't mean, like, there's been times that we've hurt each other with this. Definitely been some times. But is there ability to repair and to make space and to go back to the core values of what we believe? So that was a long-winded answer, but hopefully that
No, that was beautiful. I love that so much. And just one follow-up question on this, but do you have any advice for anyone who might be like seeking similar relationships with people? I've heard so many times in my life, like I can't even tell you how many. Like you have to be the same political party or you have to have the same beliefs to make it work. Otherwise, like it's just not. But that's not the case. I mean, you guys are a perfect example of that. And I know plenty of couples who have very different political beliefs and they make it work. And it's like so
yeah,
cool to see. But like, do you have
yeah,
any advice for people who might be like dating someone and they're like, oh, I don't know, but like I really like them? I don't know. Just like any
yeah.
advice.
I love dating advice. I think if you're dating someone and they have a different political belief system, I would encourage you to see if there's room for growth and for you and for them. If there's willingness to grow with you. It's when it's when you're with someone that says this is my way or the highway, or this is my way and it's never changing. That's when like the stuck feeling comes, and that's where a lot of like conflict's gonna happen. So with me and Colton, like, that's something that I'm just so, so grateful. I love that man so much of like, okay, this is what we believe, and can we grow with each other? Can I give you space to grow? And can I give myself space to grow? So when someone says like, "No, you have to think this way," that's a red flag. Run away, jump away from them, because you want to be with someone that is willing to witness and celebrate your growths rather than tear you down. So that's my advice.
I love that so much. Thank you so much for sharing that. I so shifting into some specific political beliefs, if you're comfortable sharing, do you feel like you identify with a certain political party more than another one?
Yeah. I would say I identify as Democrat for sure.
Okay.
I'm very much the believer vote the person, not the party. And right now, I don't like the person in the party that's I don't like Trump. Like, I don't know if you wanna edit that or if you can't, but,
Nope, that's
I
great.
don't
That's your truth.
that's like, I don't agree with that person and how that the way that they're running the country. There's been times in my life where I've leaned both ways, right? Like, I don't think the Republican Party is inherently evil. I don't inherently think the Democratic Party is evil as well. I think they choose people, that sometimes represents them in the best ways and represents them in the most terrible and despicable ways ever. So, yes, I would lean more left and more probably vote Democratic, and I did in the last election. But there's a lot of issues that I lean more right, and it's the same for Colton, like, there's a lot of issues that he leans more left, so we're kind of fluid in that way, but when it comes to, like, just kind of big core stuff, it's more left-leaning, but not crazy, and more right-leaning, but not crazy in that way.
Gotcha. Yeah, no, that makes sense. Do you feel like this specific identification or label of like mostly Democrat or mostly liberal, do you feel like that impacts your life at all?
Yes and no. Um, I have a hard time like, if I label myself as, like, a Democrat. I usually say I'm left-leaning or right-leaning, um, because it comes with a lot of added expectations, right? Like, "Oh, if you're a Democrat, you must mean this or that, or you must believe this or that," and the same thing with the Republican, this or that. So, like, if you were to ask, like, my husband's like, "Oh, I lean more right," and I'm like, "Have voted Republican in the past," people are, like, assuming 500 things about him, and same with
Right.
me. And they're assuming 500 million things about a relationship of like, how dare a Republican marry a Democrat? Um, and so I don't like using the labels because I don't like people assuming my life story based on my political party.
Hmm.
So when I say left leaning, it's more of like I'm saying I'm left leaning because I want you to ask about and have a conversation of why, because there's way more into this than just me checking that box.
Um, because of this like specific identity and like everything we've talked about today, obviously there's so much more, but what do you feel like you are the most passionate about? And we touched on a little bit like culture, we touched on immigration a little bit, but what do you think are the things that you are super passionate about politically?
This is like a really general thing, but it covers a lot of topics, but just more space, justice, and opportunities for minorities. And that minorities includes like females, BIPOC, LGBTQ, immigrants, um, all of the above, like disabilities. Um, I'm very passionate about helping those that have systemically not been given those opportunities, whether it's their race or their language or ability, that they are given, that there's equity, that there is the opportunities for them. And I get like it honestly, like that's like those any of those issues under that like broad umbrella, I get very fired up and passionate about of people need to be treated like humans. That's the end of the day. Like that's literally at the end of the day, can we treat people as humans and see them as humans? And I feel like there's so many policies and laws and beliefs and stereotypes that are used to dehumanize people and see them as less than, because if we see them as less than, it's easy to hurt them.
Mhm.
So I get really like I don't know if you follow me on Instagram, but I definitely get really fired up when
I love your stories. I love your
I'm
posts.
like what in the world are we doing? We're really failing as a human race for like doing this for X amount of years. And so those are like the biggest issues that I get fired up. All of the above.
Yeah. No, I think that's a good broad like overview. Just treat people as people. Um, so just shifting to some final thoughts, what do you hope that people take away from listening to this interview?
Ugh. Um, I hope they hear another BIPOC voice in Utah. Um, and one who's definitely willing to talk about all the pros and cons. I also like I'm really happy that there's more light on like a mixed political leaning couple. Because what you were saying, like, oh, don't marry someone of this like different political belief system, like that definitely was like mentioned to us like in our early on dating. And I honestly do remember like maybe a couple of like people in our friend group mentioned that too. Because
I'm sure.
there is like a general fear of like that like that's two different belief systems. You can't change core beliefs in some ways. Um but like they like for anyone that's listening that's in that situation, like it can work. Like as like if you develop core values, if you practice like actual like repair after arguments, if you can practice like listening and validation, and also if you can practice like growth, like are you willing to change together? Then you're chilling. Definitely not easy, but you can still be chilling too. And so that's something that me and Colton actually love talking about is that we are so different. And that's something that we love about each other is that we are so different. Because if we were the same person, I think we would bore the hell out of each other. So our differences are something that makes us feel more connected, honestly, and more empowered and excited to like raise kids in that like environment of like you can hold a lot of different truths and a lot of different beliefs, and that's okay because there isn't like I don't like there is gray to things. It, so that was long-winded as well. So hopefully that answered your question.
No, that was great. Yes. Yeah, thank you. I love that focusing on like the growth and being open-minded and if we can just get people to be open-minded, like I think that is like at the end of the day that's all that matters. I think that's really cool. Um, what do you wish that people better understood about you and others who see the world similarly to you?
That we like me, I can't speak for behalf of the BIPOC community. I don't have that power, nor do I want to. Like I can only speak for Malia. But I would say is that I want the same things as anyone else wants in life, like career, family, safety, live, laugh, love. And I wish more people, specifically the majority, knew that perhaps for me, there's a lot more hoops and a lot more challenges, specifically for being like brown, that I go through to get to where you're already at. And so I wish they knew that because I feel like if they knew that, they would be able to give more space to it, or there wouldn't be so many assumptions. Um, and I think that's what I can only speak from like myself, but I think that's a big wish of like, okay, like you're already there. It took me like a couple other different filters and like U-turns and so like pausing to me to get where you're at just based on like my own experiences with this. So like I'm specifically like talking about like when I was applying to grad school, I remember like, oh, I can't go to grad school, like they won't accept me. I don't feel like I'm good at writing. Like I sound stupid. I don't have resources. I've never like applied to like it was just like so many I don't know what I'm doing. I'm too scared to do an internship. What if they look at my name and think about this about me? Um, and I had other friends being like, "Oh yeah, like I just like college was always easy and like I had a million recommendations to this and that. And so it was just like I'm thinking about how my race is going to affect this like this grad school application, or how I am considering going to college at like going to grad school in a predominantly white college again. And you were just thinking about what's the best like letterhead for my my like paper.
Hmm.
We both got to the same space, but it took a lot more filters that are unique to being BIPOC to get there for me. I think that makes sense. If it doesn't, just like snap and edit it.
Yes, no, that makes total sense. And I think that's a really good, I mean, for me as like a white person, that's a really good thing to like try to listen and try to understand that and like try to hold more space for people like you and people who have like experiences similar to yours. And so I think that's a really, I don't just like really beautiful way to put it. And yeah, we all need to be more understanding and accepting and trying to make, you know, equity and inclusion like more of a priority, which I don't feel like it really is right now. And so
Mhm.
yeah, thank you. Thank you for that. So any parting words before we wrap up? That was kind of all my questions.
Mm. I had a professor, and I don't know if you want to cut this or add this, if it enhances or it takes away from this interview, but he always like ended classes with "Life's a mystery, man. I don't know what the heck we're doing on this big rock in the sky, but all of us are just trying our very best." Um, he was trying to be goofy, but I always like appreciated that because like this is my first time at life. This is my first time navigating my own ethnic background, political opinions, a marriage, a mixed political marriage. And I imagine everyone else is listening, unless you're reincarnated. This is your first time at life too. So, uh, and so I guess like parting words is like just remember that we're all trying to figure this out. And so let's just be a little bit more compassionate with each other in our own processes and journeys with that.
Beautiful.
Yeah,
Perfect parting words. I love that so much. Thank you. Thank you so much, Malia, for being here and thanks for being vulnerable, sharing your story.
of
I'm so excited
course.
for people to listen to this. So thank you.